Picture a cave, pitch dark, about 100,000 years ago. Lying in front of you is a 12-year-old boy. He's just died. Somewhere outside, the world keeps going. Wind, insects, the ordinary noise of a night that doesn't care one way or another. Outside, a hyena is pacing back and forth, waiting for its chance. It doesn't get one. Someone has already dug a small pit into the rock floor. They lay the boy on his side, fold his arms gently around his neck, and place deer antlers across his chest, placed there on purpose, it seems. Like one last hug. Then the pit is covered, and the hyena is left outside the story, sniffing at nothing. Chimpanzees and elephants can react strongly to death, too. Elephants especially, they'll stand by a dead companion for hours, touching the bones with their trunks, sometimes even carrying a bone around for a while before putting it back down. It looks like grief, or something close to it. But as far as we know, they don't dig a hole. They don't choose a position. They don't leave anything behind on purpose. Burying the dead with care, with objects that serve no purpose except meaning, might be one of the most human things we do. And it's older than almost anyone expects. Long before farming, before writing, before anything we'd call civilization, someone was already kneeling in the dirt, taking their time over a body. Almost every culture on Earth has some way of caring for the dead. Different rituals, different beliefs, but the same underlying instinct. Don't just leave them there. And once you start asking where that instinct came from, you end up digging through a surprising number of very old, very strange, very human cases. So here's today's question. When did we start doing this? And why? That boy is real, by the way. Archaeologists call him Qafzeh 11, found in a cave near Nazareth, Israel, and this is one of the oldest burials almost everyone agrees on. Not probably a grave, about as close to confirmed as archaeology gets. Someone cut a neat rectangular pit straight into the bedrock. That alone takes effort and intention. Bedrock doesn't dig itself. Deer antlers were placed across his chest and hands in a way that looks deliberate, not accidental. And scattered near the bones, archaeologists found pieces of red ochre, a red pigment that had to be carried in from somewhere else, because it doesn't just turn up naturally in that cave. None of it was necessary for getting rid of a body. All of it looks chosen. Nearby, in the same cave, another burial holds a man cradling the jaw of a wild boar in his arms, maybe one of the oldest funeral gifts on record. Whoever buried him clearly thought a boar's jaw was a fitting thing to send someone off with. And it's not just Qafzeh. A separate cave called Tinshemet, not far away, shows similar burials, a similar curled-up position, similar use of ochre, which suggests this wasn't one grieving family doing something strange and unusual. It was closer to a shared custom spreading across the region roughly 100,000 years ago. So here's our first marker. Somewhere around 90,000 to 100,000 years ago, people were already burying their dead. With posture, with care, with intent. That's roughly 10 times older than the pyramids. Long before anyone thought to build a monument, someone was already deciding how a body should be laid to rest. And the story only gets stranger from here. If Qafzeh was a quiet, modest funeral, Sungir was the opposite. Sungir doesn't whisper. Sungir shows up wearing everything it owns. At a site near Vladimir, Russia, archaeologists found the grave of an adult man, and close by, a double grave holding two children, buried head to head. Now, the grave goods. Over 13,000 beads, carved from mammoth ivory. Some estimates suggest each one took around 45 minutes to make. Do the maths. And that's something like 10,000 hours of labor poured into decorating a funeral. Picture the bead maker halfway through, wrists aching, glancing at a pile that somehow never seems to get smaller, wondering exactly how many more thousand beads this funeral is going to need. The two children were also buried with spears made from mammoth tusks, straightened using heat and water, a genuinely difficult technique, the kind of thing you'd expect on a prized weapon, not a child's grave. Here's the strange part. These were children. In a hunting and gathering world, kids that age usually haven't had time to earn anything like this. which has led some researchers to a theory, still debated, that status back then could already have been inherited. Prehistoric privilege, it seems, may already have had a family plan. There's also a darker theory, that these two children may have been part of some kind of sacrifice. It's one hypothesis among several, not a settled answer. Most researchers still lean toward inherited status over sacrifice. Either way, Sungir tells us something. 34,000 years ago, humans weren't just burying the dead. They were putting on a show while doing it. Whatever grief looked like at Sungir, it clearly came with a budget. This next one might be my favorite because it comes with a real plot twist. Back in 1960, at Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists found the skeleton of a Neanderthal known as Shanidar IV, and around the bones, clumps of pollen. The conclusion at the time made headlines everywhere. Neanderthals had laid flowers on a grave. Proof, people said, that they could grieve, that they could love, that they weren't the dim-witted cavemen everyone assumed. This flower burial story made it into textbooks for decades. It became the go-to example whenever someone wanted proof that Neanderthals had feelings like ours. Then, in 2023, a team went back to check the evidence properly. And it turns out Shanidar Cave is full of solitary bee burrows, bees that happen to haul clumps of pollen back to their nests, in a pattern that lines up a little too neatly with what was found around Shanidar IV. So, after decades of romance, the actual suspect may have been bees. A tiny, uninvited detective arriving tens of thousands of years too late, quietly unraveling one of archaeology's favorite love stories. It's a pretty spectacular twist. The quiet culprit behind archaeology's most touching story might just be a few insects that showed up thousands of years too late to get any credit. But don't feel too sorry for the Neanderthals. The core finding still holds up. Shanidar remains a tight cluster of bodies, placed there with real intention. Shanidar still gives strong evidence that Neanderthals repeatedly placed their dead in a meaningful location. The flowers, though, that part's a little less certain than we used to think. This next case is still, genuinely, unsolved. Deep in the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, scientists found the remains of Homo naledi, a small-brained relative of ours, about a third the brain size of modern humans, who lived somewhere between 236,000 and 335,000 years ago. On paper, this is not the kind of creature anyone expected to be capable of ritual behavior. In 2023, one research team claimed they'd found deliberately dug burial pits down there, along with possible engravings on the cave walls. If true, that would push back the earliest known burial by over 100,000 years, earlier than anything Homo sapiens or Neanderthals ever did. Other scientists pushed back hard. The pits, they argued, could just be natural depressions formed by water or by parts of the cave collapsing over time. Nobody's even been able to date the engravings. One formal rebuttal concluded there's simply no convincing evidence for either claim yet. A newer clue only makes it stranger. A protein study found no male-specific enamel markers in the sampled teeth, hinting the group down there may have been mostly, or even entirely, female. It doesn't prove anything about burial, it just adds one more question mark to an already crowded board. So the Homo naledi file stays open. Maybe one day it'll be the earliest burial in human history. For now, it's a real mystery, not a settled fact, the kind of case where every new clue somehow raises another question instead of closing the file. Of everything in this story, this is the part that tends to leave people quiet. At Pangaya Saidi, a cave on Kenya's coast, archaeologists found a small pit. Inside were bones so fragile that a single touch could turn them to dust. It took 4 years just to carefully remove them, piece by piece, without losing anything. What they found was a child around 2.5 to 3 years old, lying on their side, knees drawn up, the exact position of a sleeping toddler. The bones around the skull suggest the head once rested on something soft, like a pillow, long since gone. The way the collarbone and ribs had shifted suggests the small body had been wrapped, maybe in cloth, maybe in skin. Dating puts this burial at around 78,000 years ago. The oldest confirmed deliberate burial in Africa, the continent where our species began. There are no beads here, no spears, No grand gestures. Nothing that says, look how important this person was. Just a body, wrapped with care, and a pillow that no longer exists. It doesn't look like status. It looks like someone trying to hold on to a child for just a little longer. Nobody can read the minds of people who lived 100,000 years ago, so the honest answer is, we don't fully know. But two ideas keep coming up. One is practical. Burying a body keeps the smell down, keeps predators and disease away from where people live. It's hygiene, dressed up as ritual, if you squint at it a certain way. No mystery required, no belief system needed, just common sense passed down from one generation to the next. The other is symbolic, the careful positioning, the ochre, the antlers, the beads, the pillow that isn't really needed for hygiene at all. That points towards something else. Grief, memory, maybe even an early idea that something continues after death. Most of what we've seen leans toward the second one, but archaeologists stay cautious here. Both reasons could easily have existed side by side, tangled together, differently from one group to the next. Maybe the very first burial started out practical, and only later, somewhere along the way, picked up all the meaning we now attach to a funeral. From a cave in Israel almost 100,000 years ago, to a lavish grave in Russia, to a flower mystery solved by bees, to a still open case in South Africa, to a small pillow left for a child in Kenya, one thread runs through all of it. Humans never seemed able to just walk away from their dead. They dug. They arranged bodies with care. They buried things that served no purpose for the living, over and over again, across tens of thousands of years and thousands of kilometers. We don't bury the dead only to remove a body. We bury them because humans needed a way to say goodbye. And it turns out we've needed that for a very, very long time. Long before we had words for it, we already knew how. If you found this video interesting or useful, please give it a like, leave a comment, or share it with someone who might enjoy it. It only takes a second, but it gives us a huge motivation to keep making thoughtful and valuable videos for you. Every like, comment, share, and subscription means a lot to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.